All right, welcome to my introduction to the multiple choice and my top 8 strategies. So looking through my PowerPoint, the main activities are a handout, looking through a model or an example of how I went through the St. Antoine passage from the midterm, and then you guys are going to try to revisit Patty's passage, which was actually the first passage from the multiple choice. So what I'm going to be doing is, these are my two main resources, this handout and then the pictures of my multiple choice exam that is heavily annotated for teaching, modeling, and such. So first thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read through this on your own. In class, we're going to read through it, and then we're going to read through it together. But these are my top 8 strategies. So pause right now, and read through. All right, welcome back. So now we're going to look through, and I'm going to break these down in the passage. So the first 3 are strategies to do even before you get into actually reading closely, and then the last strategies are what to do as you read and then when you finish reading. So I'm going to shout out and talk about those a little bit in my first example, which is my St. Antoine passage, which I'll find here in a minute. Okay, so this is my St. Antoine passage. What I did was the blue and the red are kind of my main annotations when I was in student mode, and then the yellow and pink are my reflections. So ignore the yellow and pink in terms of it being a student test. So the first thing I believe in is reading the footnotes first, even before the questions, because the footnotes are going to give you predictions and vocabulary that might help shape your understanding of the passage before you begin. So it is a district of Paris, and it is waste parts of a butchered animal. So 2 things I'm thinking about is Paris is old world. If you know anything about Paris, it's definitely a reference to old Europe, and it's also huge, very populous, and there was a lot of poverty. Like, even if you've ever watched Beauty and the Beast, the live action, it's kind of depicted as poverty or filled with disease and things like that. So that's my first prediction. And then it talks about animals, so I'm wondering if it has to do with disease or with hunger, because that's kind of a common theme of old lit. The next thing is I actually went through and I did some underlining of the questions. I noticed they want you to pay attention to the first sentence, and I'm not doing everything. Like, some of these questions doesn't make sense to kind of go through. I noticed there was the mill, and that seems interesting. I noticed the word hunger. I also noticed verbs, which verbs remind me of actions. So actions could be violent, actions could be important, or create conflict. And then I noticed what's called a thread. So a thread is basically a reoccurring motif or theme or focus. So this is the second time the word hunger has showed up. Also, hunger is capitalized, which might be important. I look down, and here's a third situation of hunger showing up. And then when I look over here, there's a couple other things that are kind of minor that we might talk about later, but they always like to look at tone. They always like to look at the passage of the purpose of the passage overall, which are kind of common, but they did mention drops of oil. So then I annotate at the end. You don't have to, because it does feel like a time waste. But my overall impressions is this is about hungry people in Paris. So we'll see if those predictions reign true. So that's my pre-reading strategies. Preview and predict, use the footnotes, annotate the questions, and then maybe give yourself an overall impressions, whether that's just in your brain or on the page with an annotation. So now as I go through the passage, I annotate in the passage. I don't annotate a lot. I probably annotate more on poems than I do on prose, because I read poems a couple times, and prose I just kind of read once through and reread as I do the questions. So I annotate for summary and context or comprehension, and I tend to do that on this side. So the first thing is I annotated Paris is personified. And then I annotated, this is a lot of bad things. So my annotations are not sophisticated. They're just kind of quick little references, snappy little things to help me get through the passage. I did pick up on mill because it was here, so I boxed it, and then I just put the mill as a metaphor. I picked that up comprehension-wise. Hunger shows up, and I thought it was interesting. It was capitalized. And then I also boxed the drops of oil, And then you'll notice I have some craft comments. And I also obviously annotated based on the questions, which was a lot more boxing and referencing. Over on this side is where I tend to put my craft analysis. I don't know why. It just kind of became a pattern of behavior. But I noticed there was a lot of long syntax and there was a lot of repetition. And I'm wondering if that's important. But I definitely think the mill is a metaphor. And then it was about being hungry. So that's that. Oh no, that stupid thing has popped up. But that little annotation, which is hungry exclamation point, that's what this passage was really about for me. So I've read through the passage, I've figured out some things, annotated. What I'm going to do is let the questions help me comprehend the passage more. And I'm also going to eliminate stupid things that make answers wrong. Psychology-wise, when you are able to take 5 possible answers and pare it down to 2 or 3, it like relieves worlds of anxiety and stress for you. And when you do that, look at if there is one word that takes away or makes the answer not valid. And also look at the tone. So here's a good example. If you've read this hunger passage, it is negative, it is negative, it is negative. Like I don't see anything in that passage that makes me feel happy or uplifted. So when it says what describes this passage in terms of tone, hopeful is a stupid, I'm surprised I didn't cross it out. It's definitely not hopeful at all. Like there is no hope in this passage at all. I don't think it's really ambivalent. Like the person's not like, hunger, whatever. Like that didn't make any sense. So that's why I have a cross out. I don't get any feelings of hysteria. Like hysteria is like they're losing it. I feel like it's very controlled. And I don't really, I mean, ironic, it's kind of doing that, but it's definitely insistent. And that's because of my syntax. If you notice my syntax comments or annotations, that was the #1 most prevalent craft device that I noticed. So that's why I picked E. If you look up here, here's another example, a better example of eliminating the wrong answer. So what is the purpose of the passage? I don't think it has anything about philosophical reflections. Like he's not debating the ways of philosophy. I definitely don't think there's anything politics-wise in it. Like, you could try to project it's about politics because it's about being hungry, but there's nothing about political officials who make that. I don't think there's anything where you are comparing other cultures. It's all focused on Paris. And so I'm kind of in between the moral and then the social, but it feels more social to me, and it is critical of the social problems. I don't think it's doing anything moral, and also this word right here is a distractor. So it's just a little bit too wordy, and it doesn't quite make sense. Same thing up here. There's no violence. There's definitely no optimism. So eliminating the wrong answers is incredibly helpful. You can see I have a lot of little scratch outs, but also watch out for the frickin' distractors. The distractors are an opportunity for the AP reader to put something on the page that makes you think it's right because it, quote, looks right. It looks AP-ish. It looks upper level, but that doesn't mean it's right. So question 12 is a perfect example. The correct answer is personification. Personification is a very simple literary device, like you guys learn it freshman year in Gen Ed English. But what they do is they put surrealism, mock heroic style. Those are distractors. Those don't make any sense in relationship. Surrealism I think is a literary movement. It's definitely not doing anything heroic, but because those word choices look a little fancy, kids might gravitate towards them because they don't know the definitions clearly. So be careful about those. Finally, the last 2 strategies, which is in-text evidence and the thread. Those ones are the hardest strategies in a sense because they are helping you push through the 99 versus 100% correct answer, which is so common on these, where they have just one option. They have 2 options basically, and you have to figure out which one is the best. So I will show you. I got burned by this. So question 17 I got burned by. I picked E. The reason why I picked E was because I was feeling pretty good about myself, and I thought to myself, I kind of sat back and I thought in general, and I'm like, yeah, there was a lot of scenarios, you know, And ooh, it creates a history. And I started to project what I thought was an interpretation and what I believed about the passage. But the problem was there's no evidence that truly pushes that as the correct answer. The better answer is D because of the metaphor. The metaphor is how hunger changes. So hunger was packed. Hunger repeats. So they're comparing hunger to like a person that's enduring all of this, and it keeps changing situations. But the metaphor is the powerful craft device that's going on, and because of that, down here, the evidence is better suited and proves D, not E. So you have to be careful about, is it really clearly in that passage, or are you just kind of gathering that and trying to project it on the passage? Because if that's true, you got to be careful about that. The other thing is a thread. Like you'll notice some of the answers will feel very common. So I feel like this is an intense passage because it's about the hunger and there's a lot of vivid images, but the use of the syntax is actually, it's not simple, but it's definitely very straightforward. So they're very straightforward and they use very straightforward repetitious syntax, which is A. And then they're very straightforward right here where it says it was prevalent everywhere. So that's my in-text evidence. And that's what this question is saying right here. The brevity, the briefness of the sentence emphasizes the content. And so that sentence is pretty straightforward. This is pretty straightforward, and they're both in reference to syntax or straightforward syntax. This one is not syntax related, so that thread is missing. These ones, they do have that thread of syntax, but there was definitely no rhyme, so I would cross that out. I do think B is like that tricky one, but the reality is when you look at the evidence is brief. And because that sentence is brief, that means C is the in-text evidence to support it. So what I'd like you to do is look through Patty's, and I'd like you to try these strategies. Take a look back here. We're going to go through this handout multiple times. So repetition of this and these top 8 strategies will pop up multiple times because they are the best not easy, but they're definitely good go-to strategies. So good luck. More practice you do on the multiple choice, the easier it will get. It will become more natural, much like a sports play. So good luck, and I hope you work through Patty's charcoal grill with some success. Thank you.